I never thought a locked door could lead to something life-changing. But that evening, brisk and gray, the kind that whispers of early winter, I found myself standing on my own porch, briefcase in hand, staring at my front door like it had betrayed me. I patted down my coat pocket. Nothing. Then the inside pocket. Still nothing. I reached for the keys I always kept in my slacks, but they weren't there either. Great! I muttered under my breath. Of course. It had been a long day at the office. One of those where every little thing grinds your nerves. The copier jammed, the coffee tasted burnt, and the client I'd been emailing for weeks claimed they never got my messages. And now, to top it all off, I'd locked myself out of the house. I sighed and sat down on the front step, resting my elbows on my knees, trying to decide whether to break a window, call a locksmith, or just sit and wait for the universe to apologize. But I didn't have my phone either, left it charging on the kitchen counter. Brilliant. The chill started to bite through my blazer. I glanced next door. Mrs. Holloway lived there. Sweet woman. Made excellent zucchini bread and often brought over extra slices when she baked. We'd exchanged pleasantries now and then. Her son, Jaden, lived with her again since finishing college. I hadn't seen much of him lately, just a few passing waves. A quick, "Hey," from across the yard. The thought of knocking made my stomach twist a little. I wasn't exactly the neighborly type. Kept to myself, stayed quiet, and preferred not to bother people. But tonight I didn't have a choice. I crossed the lawn, the damp grass cold beneath my shoes, and made my way to their porch. I hesitated for a moment, hand hovering over the doorbell. Then I knocked. A few seconds later, the door swung open. It wasn't Mrs. Holloway. It was Jaden. And just like that, I forgot how to speak. He had grown, more than I'd realized. When I last saw him, he was still boyish, lanky. Now he filled the doorway with broad shoulders, tousled dark hair, and a quiet, relaxed confidence. He wore a loose t-shirt and sweatpants, barefoot, his skin a little flushed from either a workout or a warm shower. He looked comfortable, at home, and entirely unaware of how that look disarmed me. "Mr. Carson?" he said, eyebrows raised. Hi," I stammered, suddenly aware of how stiff I sounded. "Sorry to bother you. I, locked myself out of my house." His lips curled into a grin. "Rough day. You could say that." Without hesitation, he stepped aside. "Come in. No reason to freeze out there." I stepped into the warmth of their living room. It smelled faintly of cinnamon and fresh coffee. The furniture hadn't changed much. Soft earth tones. A crocheted blanket on the couch. Framed family photos on the walls. "Mom's at her book club," Jaden said, closing the door behind me. "But she'd kill me if I didn't let you in." I smiled faintly. "She's always been kind. She likes you. Thinks you're classy," he added with a smirk, walking toward the kitchen. "Want a cup of coffee?" "I'd love one, actually. Thanks." I watched as he poured 2 mugs from a fresh pot. His movements were casual, efficient. He handed me one and leaned against the counter, steam rising from his cup as he took a sip. "You know," he said, tilting his head, "I always saw you around when I was growing up. You seemed like the kind of guy who had it all together." I chuckled. "That's quite the illusion." Jaden grinned. "Hey, as a teenager, that's how you seemed. Quiet, polished, always driving that same silver car. It's beige now. Still classy," he said, eyes twinkling. I felt a strange warmth settle in my chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. There was something open about him, honest. He wasn't trying to impress me. He wasn't mocking either. Just there, present. "You're not in school anymore?" I asked, sipping carefully. "Graduated last spring. Business degree," he said, then shrugged. "Still figuring out what to do with it." "That's normal," I said. "I was 30 before I knew what I wanted. And now," I hesitated. "Now I'm divorced, overworked, and apparently prone to locking myself out." Jaden laughed. A soft, rich sound that made me feel less ridiculous. "Well, you're welcome to stay here until you figure it out," he said, then added, "You know what to do about the key. I appreciate it." We moved into the living room, sat on opposite ends of the couch. He tucked one leg beneath himself and faced me, still holding his coffee, still watching me with that same easy curiosity. So, what does someone like you do when they're not getting locked out? Mostly accounting. Sometimes a bit of consulting. Boring stuff. I doubt you're boring, Jaden said, his tone quieter. I looked at him, searching for irony, but found none. And for the first time in a very long while, I didn't feel old or out of place. I felt noticed. It was supposed to be just a cup of coffee, but somehow one cup turned into two, then three. Jaden made himself comfortable on the couch, legs stretched out, one arm thrown casually over the backrest. He'd swapped the t-shirt for a hoodie, the sleeves pushed up to reveal strong forearms. His sweatpants clung a little too well to his legs as he shifted to face me. It wasn't overt. It wasn't intentional. At least that's what I told myself. He looked completely at ease. Me? I kept adjusting how I sat like a man trying to act normal in a room where something invisible was pulling the walls in closer. You always sit like that? Jaden asked with a teasing smile, tilting his head. Like what? Upright. Brupe. Like you're in a meeting. I looked down at myself. He wasn't wrong. I was sitting straight, ankles crossed, coffee mug perched carefully on one knee like I was expecting someone to hand me a clipboard. I laughed, self-conscious. Comes with the job, I guess. Jaden raised an eyebrow. You ever let loose? I shrugged. Occasionally, but mostly I like order. Keeps things manageable. That sounds exhausting, he said, grinning. Bet you alphabetize your spice rack. I smirked. Only the top shelf. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. You know what I think? What? I think you've been dying for someone to mess up your spice rack. There was a beat of silence between us, small, but loud in its suggestion. His eyes lingered just a bit longer than normal, and I felt my face grow warm. I chuckled, trying to steer us back into safer waters. Well, I've certainly never had it phrased quite like that. Jaden laughed and leaned back, but his foot lightly brushed mine as he shifted. Accidental, maybe, but it didn't feel like it. So, he said casually, swirling the last bit of his coffee. What's it like being single in your era? I raised an eyebrow. My era. You know what I mean. Grown up. Real job. Mortgage. Graying at the temples. That era. I gave him a look. Careful. You're treading dangerous waters. He grinned. Just saying, I always thought it must be kind of peaceful. Like you know who you are. No weird hookups or games. Just books and tea and doing crosswords with a glass of wine. You're not far off, I said with a wry smile. But it's also quiet. Sometimes too quiet. Jaden tilted his head. Do you like quiet? I've learned to live with it. He nodded slowly, then added, I don't think you're as quiet as you pretend to be. I didn't have a ready answer to that, so I said nothing. There was something in his tone that unnerved me. Not in a bad way. In a way that reached deeper than it should have. I wasn't used to being seen like that. Certainly not by someone like him. He leaned over to place his mug on the coffee table. As he did, his arm brushed mine. He didn't pull away. I shifted slightly, telling myself it was nothing. Friendly closeness. Heat from the coffee. Proximity. But when I turned to glance at him, he was already looking at me. His eyes were different now, less teasing, more present. I used to think you were untouchable, he said softly. You'd walk past our house, and I'd try not to stare too long. You always looked like you belonged somewhere important. I swallowed. My voice came out quieter than I intended. That's flattering. But I'm just a man with a habit of wearing too many button-downs. He smiled, then, gently, deliberately, reached out and touched the back of my hand. The warmth of his skin against mine was jarring. Not because it was unwelcome, but because I hadn't felt something so real in so long. My breath caught. He didn't say anything, just left his hand there. A simple touch. No pressure. No movement. And for a moment, the room felt suspended. Like even time had paused to see what I would do next. I looked down at our hands. My own fingers twitched with the urge to curl around his. But I didn't. I pulled away gently but clearly. Not in rejection but in caution. Because my heart was hammering in my chest and my thoughts were racing somewhere between is this happening? And this can't happen. Jaden didn't flinch. He didn't look embarrassed. He just gave me a small, patient smile and said, "Sorry, that was probably too much." I shook my head.
No.
I just wasn't expecting it. "I know," he said, leaning back. "It's okay." The silence that followed wasn't heavy, but it wasn't quite comfortable either. I tried to change the subject. Asked him about his job search. He humored me, answered, made a few jokes. We went back to sipping lukewarm coffee. But everything had shifted, and no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, the warmth of his hand lingered long after the touch had ended. That night, even after I returned home, thanks to a spare key taped inside the garden shed, long forgotten, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Jaden's hand on mine, his smile, his words. There had been something disarming in his openness, something tender and bold all at once. I tried to chalk it up to youthful curiosity or harmless affection, but a voice deep inside me, the one I usually kept muzzled, refused to let it go. Lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and, against my better judgment, let memory pull me back. Jaden wasn't always the confident, smooth young man who now sat on couches and casually touched hands. I remembered him as a lanky teenager, polite but quiet. He'd wave at me sometimes when I pulled into my driveway after work, or I'd see him helping his mother bring in groceries, earbuds dangling from his ears, hoodie too big for his frame. Just another kid on the street, someone else's story. But time had a way of slipping by unnoticed. I didn't realize when he stopped being a boy. One summer afternoon a few years ago, I came home early from work. It was sweltering out and I'd forgotten to grab the mail. As I walked down my driveway, I looked over and there he was, shirtless, mowing his mother's lawn. The sight startled me more than I'd like to admit. His shoulders had broadened. His torso was defined in a way that was adult. His hair was damp with sweat, clinging to his forehead. He wiped his brow with the back of his arm and waved when he saw me watching. "Hot one today, huh?" he'd called out. I nodded, muttered something forgettable, and went inside with my pulse quickening like I just sprinted down the street. It was the first time I'd noticed him as anything other than a neighbor's son, and that alone filled me with guilt, shame even. He was younger, too young, and I was decades into adulthood, old enough to know better, old enough to shut the door on feelings that made no sense. But the thing is, I never really shut the door. I just closed it gently and stood behind it, listening. There were other moments too, glances across the fence. That time he caught me fixing the gutter and offered to help. The time he stopped me in the driveway to talk about his final exams, and how he was thinking of majoring in business because it was safe, but didn't know if safe was what he wanted. That one stayed with me, because he looked directly at me when he said it, like he was asking something else entirely. But I always told myself the same thing: he's straight. You're older. This is just you being lonely. And I was lonely. The divorce had ended years ago, but the silence afterward lingered like smoke in an empty room. I went through the motions: work, home, occasional dinners with distant friends. I didn't date, didn't flirt, didn't even entertain the idea, because what would be the point? I was graying at the temples, had a slightly bad knee, and didn't understand how to use half the dating apps that people talked about these days. More than that, I didn't want hookups or awkward banter over screens. I wanted connection, depth, someone who saw me without needing a performance. But as the years rolled on, that hope started to feel like a relic from another lifetime, like an old key that no longer fit any doors. So I made peace with the quiet, with the solitude. It wasn't painful anymore, just constant. That's why Jaden's presence had thrown me off so completely. He hadn't just broken the silence. He filled it with warmth, humor, and something else. Something charged, like a spark that didn't belong in my carefully muted world. And now I was left with the uncomfortable question. Had I been blind all along? Had he always seen me? Not as the older man next door, but as something more? The next morning, I found myself staring at my reflection longer than usual. The lines at the corners of my eyes, the silver streaks in my hair, the slight slouch in my shoulders. When had I started carrying myself like someone apologizing for taking up space? Jaden hadn't looked at me with pity. He didn't see someone who was past their prime. He saw me. He made that clear. So why was I the one retreating? Because of age? Because of fear? Because I didn't believe someone like him could want someone like me? I stepped away from the mirror with a sigh and grabbed my coffee. That moment on the couch, the touch, the glance, the silence wasn't imagined. I knew that now. I'd lived too long to not recognize sincerity when it was offered, even gently. Still, I wasn't sure what to do with it. Not yet. But for the first time in a very, very long while, I wanted to find out. The storm rolled in faster than expected. I'd only stopped by Jaden's house to return the mug I borrowed the night before. I had planned to hand it off quickly and retreat into the comfort of my own walls. Back to quiet, back to routine. But Jaden had opened the door with that easy grin and a, "You're not running off that fast, are you?" And somehow, I was inside again, sipping tea and listening to him talk about the job interview he had coming up. Then the first crack of thunder shook the window pane. I looked out. The sky had gone from cloudy to charcoal in minutes, and the rain started as a whisper before turning into a heavy, pounding roar. Jaden peeked through the blinds. "Damn, that came out of nowhere. I should get going before it gets worse," I said, standing. He gave me a look. "Worse? It's already a flood out there. You're not walking out in that. It's just rain. Rain that'll soak your nice work shoes and probably short out your car if you try to drive through it. Seriously, stay." I hesitated. "Come on," he added, flashing a grin. "Guest room's made up. You'll be way more comfortable here than fighting traffic and soaked clothes." Could have argued. I should have. But something in his voice, equal parts teasing and sincere, disarmed me. "Fine," I said quietly, "but only until the storm passes." He winked. "Sure. Just till then." The guest room hadn't changed much. Same old oak dresser. Same faded posters on the wall from when Jaden was younger. Except there was one bed. Not two. Not a futon tucked away in the corner. Just a full-sized bed, neatly made, soft flannel sheets folded over the top. "Thought you said guest room," I murmured. Jaden leaned in the doorway, arms crossed. "I said the guest room is made up. Didn't say how many beds were in it." "You don't keep a spare?" He shrugged. "We haven't had many guests since I moved back in. Besides," he tilted his head, "I don't mind sharing." I didn't know what to say to that, so I looked at the window instead, watching as the rain blurred everything outside into a hazy watercolor. "I'll grab you something to sleep in," he said, disappearing down the hall. Moments later, I heard the shower start. I changed slowly into the soft cotton tee and shorts he'd given me, both a little big, but comfortable. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying not to overthink the thudding of my heart or the faint scent of Jaden's cologne on the clothes. The bathroom door creaked open and I turned, only to freeze. Jaden walked out shirtless, a towel slung around his waist, damp hair falling in loose strands over his forehead. Droplets traced down his chest, catching the light. He caught my eye and smirked. "Forgot my shirt." I looked away quickly, pretending to adjust a pillow. "You okay?" he asked, towel still clinging low around his hips. "I'm fine." "You sure? You're acting like you've never seen a wet guy before." I exhaled sharply, trying to regain some composure. "You're enjoying this." "Maybe a little," he said, grin widening. He pulled on a pair of gym shorts and a dry tank top and walked over, sitting beside me on the bed. "Too close. Or maybe just close enough. You can take the bed if it makes you more comfortable," he offered. "I'll grab a blanket and crash on the couch." But something about the way he said it, gentle, casual, but testing, made me pause. "I'm not kicking you out of your own bed." He leaned back, propping himself up on his elbows. "Then we share." I turned toward him slowly. "Jaden," he cut me off softly. "You really didn't know I wanted you, huh?" My breath caught. He wasn't teasing now. Not playing. His gaze met mine with something honest and warm, something certain. I started. I thought you were straight. I thought I was just an old neighbor you were being kind to. Jaden shook his head slowly. I've known who I am for a while now, and I've known I liked you for just as long. But why me? He smiled faintly. Because you're steady. You're calm. You think before you speak. You always treated me like I mattered, even when I was just the kid across the street. And now I see you. And I like what I see. The room felt still again, like it had last night when he touched my hand. Only this time, the quiet didn't feel uncertain. Felt like a door was opening. He moved a little closer. I'm not asking for anything, he said gently. But if you want to sleep beside someone tonight instead of alone, I'd like that. I hesitated for a long moment. Then finally I nodded. Jaden pulled back the covers and slid in beside me, his body warm beside mine, his breathing calm and even. I turned off the lamp. We didn't speak, but sometime in the dark, I felt his fingers graze mine. And this time I didn't pull away. The darkness wrapped around us like a second skin, thick and quiet, broken only by the soft rhythm of rain tapping against the window. I lay still, unsure if I was holding my breath or if my body had simply forgotten how to move. Beside me, Jaden's breathing was slow, steady. But he wasn't asleep. I felt it before I saw it. His fingers grazing mine again, more deliberate this time. A soft, silent invitation. And I took it. I turned toward him, just slightly, and he shifted with me. We were close now. Closer than I'd ever allowed myself to imagine. Close enough to feel the warmth of his skin, the scent of his shampoo, the steady thump of his pulse. I can stop, he murmured. His voice was barely a whisper, but it shook something loose inside me. Something I'd locked up a long time ago. Maybe when the divorce papers were signed, maybe long before that. No, I said, my own voice low and raspy. I don't want you to. He moved closer, slowly, giving me time. His hand found the side of my face, thumb brushing along my cheek like I was something fragile. I hadn't been touched like that in years, not with care, not with meaning. You're allowed to be wanted, he said quietly. The words hit harder than I expected. He leaned in, and his lips found mine warm, soft, unhurried. Not demanding, just there, present. His kiss didn't ask for permission. It offered it. I responded instinctively. My hand slid up his arm, feeling the strength there. My other hand tangled gently in his hair, still slightly damp. He deepened the kiss just a little, not rushing, not forcing, just feeling. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, slow, careful. And it was everything. Jaden took the lead, but not with bravado. He moved with patience, like he'd been waiting a long time to show me I didn't have to be afraid, that I didn't have to earn affection by being perfect or composed. I didn't feel old with him. I didn't feel like a man clinging to the edge of something he'd missed. I felt seen. He kissed down my neck, brushing his fingers against my chest, learning me with tenderness. His hands didn't judge the shape of my body, the lines of age or stress or years unloved. They welcomed them, admired them. You're beautiful, he whispered against my skin. I wanted to laugh, to dismiss it, but something in me broke open instead. I let the words settle in my chest like warm rain in dry soil. He undressed me slowly, like it mattered, like I mattered. And when I reached for him, he exhaled against my collarbone and said, I always liked you. You just never looked close enough. I closed my eyes. Let the truth of that wash over me. Maybe I had seen him. Maybe I just hadn't believed I was allowed to want someone like him. Maybe I'd been so used to being alone that I stopped noticing who might have been watching me all along. The intimacy wasn't just physical. That was the surprise. The real connection, the one that shook me, was how he looked at me afterward. Like I was enough. Like I'd always been enough. We didn't say much. Jaden curled up beside me, head resting lightly against my chest, his arm draped across my stomach. I lay there, one hand on his shoulder, the other running gently through his hair. The room was still. The storm outside softened into a lullaby. And in that quiet, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Alive. Not just breathing. Not just existing. Alive. Sleep came eventually. Not the restless kind I was used to. Not the sort where your body collapses but your mind keeps racing. This was different. I fell asleep holding him, feeling his warmth against me, hearing the soft sound of his breath, and knowing, somehow, that I wasn't falling into something temporary. I was waking up to something real. I woke before he did. The light outside had softened from storm gray to a hazy, post-rain glow. Birds chirped like nothing extraordinary had happened, like the world was still the same. But inside me, everything had shifted. Jaden's arm lay loosely across my waist. His breath was steady against the back of my neck. His presence, warm, real, steady, was something I should have been used to by now. But I wasn't, and as I stared at the ceiling, doubts crept in. What had I done? What had he done? The warmth of the night before clashed with the cold voice in my head. He's young. He'll change his mind. He'll wake up and regret this. You were just convenient. Curiosity. I slipped out of bed gently, careful not to wake him, and padded toward the bathroom. I stared at my reflection. The same lines around the eyes. The same creases near the mouth. A day older. And yet, I looked different. Or maybe I was just seeing myself through someone else's eyes now. I dressed in the clothes from the night before, trying not to overthink. But the tight knot in my chest wouldn't go away. Jaden stirred as I stepped back into the room. His hair was a mess, his eyes heavy with sleep. But when he saw me, he smiled. Not confusion. Not regret. Just him. Bright, open, like nothing had changed. You always get up this early? He asked, voice gravelly. Habit? I murmured, unsure what else to say. He sat up and stretched, the blanket slipping off his bare chest. Come on. I'll make breakfast. I expected awkwardness, stiff conversation, regret hidden behind casual small talk. Instead, I got Jaden whistling off-key as he cracked eggs into a pan. He moved around the kitchen with comfort, bare feet against tile. Like this was just another morning. I hope you like scrambled, he said. We're out of fancy stuff. Scrambled is fine, I replied, watching him closely. He glanced over his shoulder. You're staring. I blinked. I didn't mean to. He grinned. You can. I don't mind. He handed me a mug of coffee, then gestured to the table. We sat in silence for a minute, sipping, the smell of toast and eggs filling the room. Finally, I cleared my throat. Jaden. He looked up. I don't want you to feel like you did something wrong. Last night was unexpected. I know. You're young, I said, more carefully than I meant to. You could have anyone. Jaden smiled softly. I'm not confused, if that's what you're asking. I paused. I wasn't asking. Not exactly. He set his fork down and leaned forward slightly. I'm not experimenting. I'm not trying to figure something out. I've already figured it out. I looked at him, unsure whether to feel relieved or even more lost. I like you, he said plainly. I've liked you for a while. I opened my mouth, but he kept going. I don't care if you're older. That doesn't scare me. You're calm. You listen. You don't pretend. You ground me. He reached across the table, resting his hand gently on mine. You're not my phase, he said firmly. You're my choice. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable this time. It was full, dense, real, but I still struggled to speak. You know people will talk. He shrugged. Let them. Your mom. She loves me. She'll ask questions. But she wants me happy. That's all. I shook my head slowly. You say that now. But when it's public, when it's not just inside this house. Jaden squeezed my hand. I'm not ashamed of wanting you. The words hit deeper than I expected. My throat tightened. No one had said that to me in years. Hell, maybe ever. We finished breakfast slowly. He never let go of my hand. Afterward, I helped him wash the dishes. We bumped elbows, shared quiet smiles, stole small glances that felt louder than any conversation. And yet that voice, faint, familiar, still whispered, "You don't get this kind of happiness. Not anymore." But every time I looked at him, Jaden proved it wrong. Every time he touched my hand, or looked at me like I was more than just a passing moment, he reminded me of something I'd long forgotten. I was still worthy of being chosen. Jaden's mother came home just after 3. I was still at the kitchen table, pretending to read the newspaper while Jaden fussed with the teapot like he was preparing for a royal visit. I offered, more than once, to leave before she arrived, to spare him whatever awkward conversation might follow. He refused every time. "You don't sneak someone in and hide them the next morning," he said. "That's not how this is going to be." I wasn't sure what stunned me more, his conviction or the quiet warmth in the word "this." Still, my palms were clammy and my pulse ticked high when her car pulled into the driveway. I stood quickly, smoothing my shirt. Jaden reached across the counter and gently pushed my hand down. "Sit," he said. "She's not a storm. She's just my mom." But storms are easier to predict. The front door opened, keys jangling, and I heard her voice. "Jaden? You home?" In the kitchen. Her footsteps approached, slow and casual. Then she stepped into the room. Her eyes landed on me instantly. She didn't flinch. She didn't gasp. But something flickered across her face. Surprise, recognition, and something else. Understanding. "Mr. Carson," she said, setting her purse down slowly. "Well, this is a pleasant surprise." "Hi, Mrs. Holloway," I said, forcing a smile. "I stopped by during the storm. Got stuck in the rain." Jaden stepped forward. He stayed the night. There it was. No sugarcoating. No softening. Just honesty. She looked at her son, then back at me, and then she smiled. Not the brittle kind. Not tight-lipped or forced. Just soft. "Well," she said, "I'm glad you weren't out there in that weather." Jaden walked over and pulled out a chair for her. We were just about to have tea. Mrs. Holloway sat, eyes flicking back and forth between us like she was watching a scene unfold she'd long suspected but never quite confirmed. "You want to tell me?" she asked Jaden gently. He nodded. "Yeah, I do." I braced myself. He took a deep breath and spoke clearly, with none of the hesitation I'd imagined would come with this kind of confession. "I like him, Mom. I've liked him for a while. And last night, it wasn't just about the storm. I wanted him here. I want him." She listened carefully, hands folded, expression unreadable. When he finished, there was a long silence. Then she turned to me. "Is this what you want, too?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, though I didn't see it coming." She chuckled. "Neither did I." She looked back at her son. "You're young, Jay. And he's—" She paused, not to be cruel, just to choose her words. "Older," I offered, smiling weakly. She gave me a look. I was going to say a steady man who's been good to us for years. That silenced me. Jaden reached for my hand under the table. I let him. Mrs. Holloway studied us, her gaze thoughtful but not cold. Then she said, "You make my son smile. I haven't seen that look on his face in a long time. That's what matters to me." Jaden exhaled, shoulders relaxing. "I'm not going to pretend I saw this coming," she added, pouring herself a cup of tea. "But I also know love when it walks into my kitchen." I laughed, soft and a little stunned. "That's more generous than I deserve." "No, dear," she said firmly. "That's exactly what love deserves." We sat for the next hour, sipping tea and sharing small talk. The conversation drifted from her book club to Jaden's job hunt to the neighbor's barking dog. Every now and then, her eyes would find our joined hands. She never commented, never judged. I watched Jaden speak. Relaxed, confident, no trace of the boy I once waved at over a picket fence. He looked at me the way people look at something they've chosen deliberately, proudly. "This is the man I'm seeing," he said once, when she asked how long it had been building. Not trying, not maybe, just seeing. My chest ached in a strange, unfamiliar way. Not with fear, not with shame, with peace. Later, as she stood to head upstairs, She placed a hand on my shoulder and said softly, "Don't hurt him." "I won't," I said. "Not ever." She nodded, then looked at Jaden. "And don't scare him off." He grinned. "I'll try not to." When the front door closed behind me later that evening, the rain had stopped. The sky was clear again. But I wasn't the same man who had walked in the night before, shivering and unsure. Jaden stepped out onto the porch with me, his hand brushing mine again. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "More than okay." He smiled. "Good. Because I wasn't planning on keeping you a secret." I laughed. "You made that very clear." He leaned in and kissed me, right there under the porch light. Not hidden, not ashamed. And for the first time in years, I kissed back without fear. It started with a drawer. One empty drawer in Jaden's dresser, cleared out one quiet morning without fanfare. Then came a toothbrush beside his. Then my books on his shelves. A coffee mug I liked too much to leave behind. By the time winter melted into spring, I was waking up in his bed more often than my own. My house sat quiet across the fence, still furnished, still technically mine, but it no longer felt like home. Home had laughter in the mornings and 2 coffee mugs waiting on the counter. It had Jaden humming as he made eggs, or sliding across the kitchen in socks, pointing to a spot on the counter and saying, "You're putting a plant here. I've decided." Eventually, we stopped pretending it was temporary. I moved in officially one rainy Saturday in April. No ceremony, no moving truck. Just me, a handful of boxes, and Jaden waiting with open arms at the front door. One night in early summer, we were curled up on the couch, a blanket across our legs, watching some awful documentary that had put both of us half to sleep. Jaden had his head in my lap, lazily scrolling on his phone. My fingers absent-mindedly combed through his hair. Without looking up, he muttered, "You're basically my wife now." I laughed, startled. "Excuse me?" He grinned, eyes still on his screen. "Well, you live here. You cook half the meals. You organize the bathroom like a Virgo. If that's not husband or wife material, I don't know what is." I raised an eyebrow. "So I'm the wife in this scenario?" He turned his head slightly, resting his cheek on my thigh, smirking. "You're the pretty one. So yeah." I shook my head, chuckling. "You're impossible." He finally looked up at me, the teasing fading just a little. "I'm serious, though. I like having you here. You make everything feel softer." I paused, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. Then, quieter, I said, "Then I'm proud to be." His grin faltered just for a second, replaced by something gentler. His hand found mine, squeezed it. We didn't need more words after that. A few weeks later, we took a short vacation. Just a weekend away to a lakeside cabin. Nothing extravagant. Just space. Stillness. A dock. A couple of beers. And the kind of silence that doesn't need filling. We walked hand in hand through the woods, his thumb tracing lazy circles against my palm. We sat on the edge of the dock with our feet in the water, talking about nothing and everything. His plans for grad school, my thoughts about early retirement, the dog we might adopt someday if we stopped pretending we didn't want one. In those moments, I felt time stretch. Not in a way that reminded me of getting older, but in a way that reminded me I still had time. Time to love. Time to feel. Time to be chosen. Some nights, I still caught myself staring at him across the dinner table, wondering how it happened. How a locked door, a forgotten key, and a storm brought me to this place, to him. I'd spent years assuming I'd be alone forever. That companionship was something I'd aged out of. That I'd missed the window, and now life was about quietly observing joy from a respectful distance. But Jaden didn't just open the door that night. He opened my chest, my future, my sense of worth. He reminded me I wasn't a relic. I was a person, still capable of change, of love, of feeling that flutter in my chest that I thought had died long ago. He still calls me wife sometimes, always with a grin, always with a nudge. But it never feels like a joke. It feels like an endearment, like a title earned not through ceremony but through presence. And I wear it proudly. I thought I'd live the rest of my life alone. But he came through the door and showed me I was still wanted, still worthy, still loved. What did you think of their love story? Was it heartwarming? Unexpected? Beautifully real? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe love has an age limit? Or can it surprise us at any stage of life? If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more emotional true stories like this one. We read every comment, and your voice matters here.